Shady's place continued. I felt an ache in my heart that rose like a lump to my throat as I caught myself searching for a less busy part of the room. A still, small place where there might be one or two of my daddy's footprints left. Shady tossed a block of scrap wood into an empty waste can, causing a big clang that echoed. He looked at me kind of awkward, as if he knew what I'd been searching for, but couldn't help me. The outhouse is, well, outside, and there's some cold cuts in the icebox. Would you like me to heat up some water so you could take a proper bath? No, thank you. I'm just kind of tired. Your room's upstairs. I hope you like it, he said with a quiet politeness. I wondered about Shady's jigsaw life, but decided not to pry. Not yet, anyway. My daddy, Gideon, had a healthy distrust of most people, but he trusted Shady, and so did I. Good night, I said, and climbed the stairs with my satchel. There was a kerosene lamp on the nightstand, but no matches. With the full moon beaming through the open window, it didn't matter. There was a dresser with a pitcher of water and a bowl. Usually a wash required a trip to a nearby stream or watering trough, so I felt like royalty to be able to pour myself some water and wash the dust from my face and hands. I kicked off my shoes and felt the cool floorboards shift and groan beneath my feet, as if the room was adjusting a sudden occupation after being long empty. Yawning at least 3 times, I put on my pajamas and slipped into bed. It was cozy and soft. I flapped the sheet up and down, letting it fall gently, like me on a cloud. I was drifting off to sleep when I remembered my keepsake bag. Having already come too close to losing something that day, I decided to do what my daddy always did. Anything special and important, he'd hide in an out-of-the-way place that nobody'd find. In a sleepy scramble, I fished the flour sack, my keepsake bag, out of my satchel and checked the contents. It was too dark to read the return address on the letter, but I had it memorized. Santa Fe Railroad Office, 4th and Main, Des Moines, Iowa, was the closest thing Gideon had to a place of residence. I rattled the 2 dimes, making sure they were still there. Finally, I took out the compass box. It was empty except for Hattie Mae's news auxiliary, as the compass still hung around my neck. Deciding to keep the compass on me, I put everything else back into the sack. Now, where to put it? It was usually best to find a place that was either high or low. Since I couldn't reach too high, I decided to look low. Putting my feet back on the floor, I again felt the floorboards creak and bow. Maybe one was loose enough to pull up. I took tentative steps around the room until I felt one that had a little more bounce than the others. I knelt on the floor, and with a fairly easy push and pull, the floorboard popped up enough for me to get my fingers under it and pull it up. It would have been the perfect hiding spot but for one thing. There was already something there. I pulled the something out, slow and gentle, and held it up to the moonlight. It was a Lucky Bill cigar box, and inside were papers and odds and ends. There wasn't light enough for reading, but I could tell that the papers were letters, thin and folded neat. One bigger page looked like a map. The odds and ends clanked inside the box. "You find what you needed?" Shady called from the bottom of the stairs. "Yes, sir." I slipped the papers into the cigar box and shoved it back into the floor space. My flour sack keepsake bag fit snugly beside it. Then I replaced the floorboard and crawled into bed. "Good night, then." I didn't answer right away, but I could tell he was still standing there. "Pastor Shady, how far do you think it is to Des Moines?" There was a pause, and I wondered if maybe I'd been wrong and he'd walked away. "I can't say for sure, but you see that moon out your window?" "Yes, sir, plain as day." "Well, Des Moines is a lot closer than that moon. Fact is, I bet a fella in Des Moines can see the same moon you're looking at right now. Doesn't that beat all?" His voice was shy and tender. "I'll be right down here if you need anything. Will that be all right?" he asked. "Yes, sir. That'd be all right." The pillow was cool against my cheek. It felt good giving in to sleep. Still, I brought to mind what I'd seen in the cigar box, the letters. Since Gideon had stayed with Shady, maybe this had been his room. Maybe I'd found Gideon's footprints after all. The breeze died down, but in the calm of the night, my body still felt the movement of the train. Next chapter. First morning, May 28, 1936. What kind of addlepate starts school on the last day? I had been asking myself that question since waking to the sound of pans clanking downstairs and the smell of bacon and coffee rising upstairs. My stomach growled, reminding me that Hattie Mae's meatloaf sandwich had become a too distant memory. Then I remembered the Lucky Bill cigar box. With a buzz of anticipation, I sprang out of bed and found the loose board, only to have Shady call upstairs. "Miss Abilene, you burning daylight. Breakfast is ready." As much as I was itching to get more than a moonlight look at what was in the box, I knew better than to keep a cook waiting. I left the box under the floorboard for safekeeping, and checked to make sure the compass was still around my neck. I put on my one change of clothes, a blue dress with yellow daisies. The daisies were a little faded, but not so bad you couldn't see them. Then I splashed some water on my face and ran my fingers through my hair. It felt like straw, but the color was of a rusty nail. Wearing it short, I never fussed with it much, but I did look forward to that proper bath Shady had mentioned the night before. The stairs emptied into a small back room, more of a porch, really, with a black cook stove, a wash tub, and a cot. It appeared Shady could do his eating, bathing, and sleeping all in one place. There was a plate of biscuits, slightly burnt, and bacon, just as warm and pleasant as you please, on the cook stove. Having someone cook my meals made me feel like I was at a fancy hotel. "There's some of Velma T's blackberry jam in the cupboard," Shady called from the big room with the bar top and pews. I spread on a modest amount and set it on a pink glass plate, the kind that came free in bags of sugar or flour or laundry soap. Since there was no table, I took my pink plate into the big front room. With the light of day shining through those stained glass windows onto the gleaming bar top, I didn't know whether to kneel down or belly up. Shady was tinkering at his workbench while I ate breakfast. He was looking real close at a tiny something, cleaning it off with his wire bristle brush. "What are you working on?" "The letter L," he said, squinting at his task at hand. Hattie Mae's been writing her column for almost 20 years. It's no wonder that typewriter's about to give out. He blew on the metal key and eyeballed it from a distance, wiping off the piece with a cloth. He placed it beside the typewriter. "Now she can get back to her who's, what's, whens, and wheres, and I can get the L out of here." Gideon hadn't told me that Pastor Howard had a sense of humor. Seemed nobody had told Pastor Howard either, as he didn't let on like he thought it was funny. I finished off the last of my biscuit. It was hard going down, as my mouth had gone dry. Maybe if I made myself useful, I wouldn't have to go to school. I had been in and out of schools before, but I'd always been in the same protective shade of my daddy. Here I was alone and exposed to the heat and clamor of the day. A bell started clanging from a distance, jarring me out of my thoughts. "Better get on to school. You don't want to be late." He studied the splayed-out typewriter in front of him. "Here's a couple of things for you to mind while you're there." He handed me the letters P and Q. I studied them. "If I took these, it'd sure leave Hattie Mae in a pickle and a quandary, and she wouldn't be able to type either one." Shady smiled a half-smile. As I put the letters back on the table, I noticed that the day's newspaper was lying off to the side. It was folded open to Hattie Mae's News Auxiliary. I picked it up and read the line at the bottom. "All the who's, what's, whens, wheres you'll ever need to know." I headed out, giving the cowbell above the door a mournful clang as I left. Next chapter. Sacred Heart of the Holy Redeemer Elementary School, May 28, 1936. You'd have thought I'd been used to this by now, being the new kid and all. I'd been through this umpteen times before, but it never gets any easier. Still, there's certain things every school's got, same as any other. Universals, I call them. Walking into the schoolhouse, I smelled the familiar chalky air, heard the fidgety feet rustling under the desk, felt the stairs. I took a seat near the back. My one consolation was that I knew these kids, even if they didn't know me. Kids are universals too, in a way. Every school has the ones who think they're a little better than everybody else, and the ones who are a little poorer than everybody else. And somewhere in the mix, there's usually some who are pretty decent. Those were the ones who made it hard to leave when the time came, and sooner or later, it always came. I guess I'd never find out who it was around here, it being the last day of school and all. The books were already stacked on the shelves for the summer. The blackboard was just that, black, no math problems, no spelling words. Then a girl with a rosy round face spoke up. "I bet you're an orphan." "Soletta Taylor," a skinny red-haired girl scolded. "Why would you say such a thing?" "Well, she came in on the train without a mama or daddy, didn't she? It was all the talk at the Five and Dime." "Well, maybe you shouldn't be listening to all the talk. Besides, that doesn't mean she's an orphan." The girl twisted one of her red braids and looked at me. "Does it?" My face was hot and probably red, but I squared my shoulders. "My mother's gone to that sweet by and by." I said it loud enough for everybody to hear, since they were all ear-cocked anyway. But some gave me sympathetic looks for my loss. I didn't figure it was a lie, since who knew for certain what that sweet by and by was? Most folks seemed to think it just meant she had died and gone to a better place. But in my book, it just meant she had decided that being a wife and mother wasn't all it was cracked up to be. And when I was 2, she joined a dance troupe in New Orleans. But since I had no memory of my mother, it was just hard to miss her. "But," I continued, answering the next question before they could ask it, "I got a daddy." I'd often been asked about my mother, but until now I'd never had to explain the whereabouts of Gideon. It wasn't fair, him putting me in this predicament. "He's working a railroad job back in Iowa. He says it's not a fit living for a girl my age, so I'm here for the summer." I didn't say that the railroad had been a fit living for me pretty near my whole life, and I didn't see why this summer was any different. "But he's coming back for me at the end of the summer," I went on. For some reason my words rang a little hollow. I wasn't sure if it was the look Hattie Mae and Shady had exchanged the day before, or the look of pity on some of the kids' faces just then. Maybe they knew of someone else who got left for good. But Gideon was coming back for me, and I'd have a few choice words for him when he arrived. "See, Letty, I told you she's not an orphan," said the red-haired girl. I figured Letty must be short for Solita. "They're cousins," said a freckled-faced boy in overalls, as if that explained everything. "Your daddy ever seen anyone get flattened by a train?" Now what kind of question is that? It was Letty who said it. "Come on, Ruth Ann, you jumped on me for asking a dumb question. What about Billy's?"